Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Connecting America on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Mark Bonamo here at the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey. There's Alisyn Camerota joining us from home base. We're glad you're all here with us. A lot has happened since this time yesterday, right? When we anticipated largely focusing on the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks. Overnight, the scene we are familiar with in Lower Manhattan at this time every year, the Tower of Light there, as it has been in years past, the Tribune light illuminating the city down there in Lower Manhattan. This just brings back so many memories for so many people. It's one of those days, guys, when you sort of stop and think about where you were at this time 24 years ago, Alisyn.
Oh my goodness, Jim. I mean, I can't believe that we've made it 24 years. That day was so apocalyptic, so devastating. I didn't know how we would ever go on, but we have gone on incredibly. I mean, it's just I guess, a tribute to the power of survival and resilience.
Where were you?
I was on my honeymoon. I had
Wow.
gotten married 9 days earlier, and I was in Italy. Tim and I were in a little hill town in Florence and we were on a little tour. And I remember seeing that's us. I think it's the same day. I mean, I think that this was right before we had gotten the news. And I remember seeing my tour guide, who happened to be American, getting a call on her cell phone and then looking stricken, and she was pacing around, and I came out and said, "What, everything okay?" And she said, "A plane just flew into the World Trade Center." And like all of us, I thought, well, that's a big screw up, you know? Like, I mean, I assumed it was a tourist plane or a helicopter that had gone off course, because our minds, our imaginations couldn't fathom what we were about to
And
experience.
were you stuck there in Italy for a while? Because obviously we remember there were no flights going anywhere for a time.
It was only a day. We were supposed to come back on the 17th. Our flight was delayed until the 18th. But for those next 72 hours, I remember them being some of the most free floating, overwhelming anxiety I've ever felt, because we were disconnected. We couldn't get cells out. We couldn't even get phone lines out. And not knowing if all of America was under attack, not knowing what was going to happen next, not knowing if our loved ones were safe, not knowing who we knew in the World Trade Center. It was really an intense time. And I just want to say, I will never forget the love of the Italians, how they bathed us. I mean, they basically took Tim and me in. They were giving us water. They were giving us like cold compresses, and they were crying every banner in Florence outside storefronts. "We stand with America. We love America." I'll never forget the goodwill and basically the bond that Italians showed us that time, during that whole era.
You talk about that uncertainty and just so much that we didn't know. I remember feeling that same way. And I was in New York that morning. I was getting ready for work and then went right to Rock Center. I was working at WNBC at the time, and my boss said, go down on the set with Chuck and Sue. This is in the month after, but at Ground Zero. But the day of, we were just on the air for hours, and we were trying, along with the rest of America, to figure out what has just transpired. And there, with Chuck Scarborough and Sue Simmons, we just talked for hours and tried to process what had just happened. Mark, where were you?
I was in downtown Newark, New Jersey that day.
Yeah.
At the time, I was teaching school, and you go in to start your day, and then all of a sudden, everything went terrible from that point on. The children at the time were
How
all
old were
watching
they?
television. They were in middle school.
Okay.
And they're just jaws dropped, shocked, wondering what's going to happen next. One of the children, actually, his father was a Newark police officer. He's wondering, is he going to go in? Is he going to have to deal with this? There's a part of Newark, New Jersey, Sacred Heart Cathedral. It's the highest point in the city. And after school is dismissed, many of us went outside the church, both to pray. And there's a straight shot where you can look into Manhattan and you see all the smoke and the fire. It was apocalyptic. But even worse, where I grew up, Staten Island, New York.
Oh, it took a huge hit, right?
It was terrible. I went to a high school, Monsignor Perel High School in Staten Island, where many people worked as firefighters, police officers on Wall Street. 23 members of my high school, the alumni, died that day. And subsequently, many have died because of 9/11 related illnesses. It's just lingering on to this day.
We are going to visit with those who lived through 9/11 very directly and very personally. More on that coming up, of course. But we also want to talk about another shock to to befall us just yesterday, less than 20 hours ago. Shocking assassination on a college campus. Conservative activist and founder of the organization Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, was shot right in front of thousands of people, young people gathered to see him at that event at Utah Valley University. Multiple videos of this shooting and the panicked audience running away, they spread across social media in no time. This is moments before the shot rang out. This morning, despair and word from authorities that a person of interest who was in custody has been released, and the manhunt is therefore still underway to find this shooter. The shooter got away. 31-year-old Kirk emerged as a prominent right-wing voice, attracted millions of listeners and followers on social media, on his podcast, and elsewhere. A lot we need to unpack about this shooting, the investigation, his legacy, and what this means for America going forward. Prominent Democrats and Republicans both commented on this killing in the aftermath. California's Governor Gavin Newsom calling the attack disgusting, vile, and reprehensible. Speaker Mike Johnson saying it was, quote, utterly devastating, and our prayers go out to his wife and young children. House Republicans posting this tribute to Charlie Kirk last night. It reads, a father, husband, son, and a man of Christ, a titan of modern conservatism. May God bless Charlie Kirk and his family. We know Kirk was close with President Trump, and the president announced the news of his death on Truth Social. And then he spoke about his friend from the Oval Office last night.
I ask all Americans to commit themselves to the American values for which Charlie Kirk lived and died, the values of free speech, citizenship, the rule of law, and the patriotic devotion and love of God. Charlie was the best of America, and the monster who attacked him was attacking our whole country. An assassin tried to silence him with a bullet, but he failed, because together we will ensure that his voice, his message, and his legacy will live on for countless generations to come.
As we said, was speaking at that event at Utah Valley University. It was a single shot that killed him. Police are saying the shooter wore dark clothing and fired from a rooftop on campus some distance away. And officials, the governor there, calling it a political assassination. And as we said, that shooter is still not found this morning. When those shots were fired, pandemonium erupted. Police say roughly 3,000 people were there at about 12:20 local time in Utah. They locked down the campus. Law enforcement agents carrying machine guns searching that campus. Kirk was rushed to the hospital in an SUV. There was no ambulance there. He did not survive, as we know. He was only 31. He emerged, Alisyn, as a prominent right-wing voice, right? Attracting millions of listeners, as we said, followers on social media. And we're hearing from those who were close to him this morning, including our next guest. And we should note, as we bring in Joe Walsh, that Kirk leaves behind his wife, Erica, former Miss Arizona, a ministry leader and the host of a devotional podcast. And they have two young children. Joe Walsh, thank you for being here on Connecting America this morning. We know you had a personal relationship with Kirk. Tell us how that developed.
Jim, Alisyn, good to be with you. We were close. This may sound weird to say now. I would have said this a day or two ago. Though Charlie Kirk and I were on opposite sides of the divide in this country, he was literally like a son to me. I first met him when he was 16 years old. He was from my congressional district. I became a political mentor to him. I helped him start and launch his organization, TPUSA. And I was like a father figure to him. He was a son to me. And we were very close. And then Trump came along and, we broke up. We would go after each other on social media, being on opposite sides. But Jim, even right up until yesterday, I've just always considered him to be a son. So I'm just so saddened for him and his family.
And we're sorry for your loss too. I didn't know Charlie Kirk. I'm surprised that our orbits, that I don't even believe I've ever interviewed him, despite him being such a well-known figure in the country. But I was gutted. I was gutted by this. This isn't this isn't who we are. I mean, he, in fact, was someone who always, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, invited debate and discourse. I mean, he was sitting under a banner that said, prove me wrong. He believed we should talk to people on other sides of the aisle. And so he sort of represented, I mean, though he was a stalwart right-wing, conservative figure, I think he believed in engaging the other side.
Well, two things, Alisyn. You all know, this is the world we live in now. Any public figure, when I go out and give any speech in public, I'm worried about who's in that room, who's at that event. This is the world we live in now. It is like it's political warfare out there every time we're in public. Charlie engaged in that warfare. He did take on all comers and welcome debate. He was very provocative. He was very in your face, very strong with his beliefs. And just look at the reaction. I mean, I abhorred much of what he believed. And it's possible to abhor what he believed and condemn murder. And there are so many people on the left and the right last night and today who just can't make that distinction. We have to.
You talk about his ability to connect with younger voters. What do you think about Charlie Kirk specifically appeal to younger voters and to listeners of his widely listened to podcast?
Look, I think that's what's so jarring is this was a political assassination. He was not an elected official. He was a private citizen. He was a movement leader. And the movement he developed, again, not a fan of the beliefs based on that movement, but I can't think of anyone in my former political party who's had a greater impact on grassroots organizing than Charlie Kirk. He literally moved the dial when it came to which political party young people, especially young men, gravitate toward. His impact was just profound.
Joe, we know that you like to stir the pot, if you will, and share your strong views. What's the impact for you, if any, right now on your feeling about speaking out? And does this send a chill through your spine in terms of being worried about speaking out?
That's a great question, Jim. Look, I used to be, and Alisyn knows this well, much more provocative and much more divisive back in the day in my political discourse. The election of Trump the first time kind of straightened me up. So I now engage in conversations with everybody across the divide, but they're conversations. What Charlie was doing was much more provocative and, yes, divisive. And he held views that could be seen of as very divisive. I don't do that anymore. But I think all of us now who do want to sit down with people who don't agree with us, there's a real chill in the air now, a real chill in the air, because you just don't know if America's ready for this.
But we need it more than ever, obviously. I mean, I know you
Yes.
feel that same way, Joe. And I just want to end by saying I can't help but think of his wife and his young children. This is obviously so devastating. And she has been active on social media. And I just went on Instagram yesterday when all of this happened. And it was so interesting. She spoke in almost prescient now ways about how time is fleeting and how much gratitude she had for the moment. I mean, she said, things, she just said things like I'll quote her, life, weirdly enough, is a countdown. You don't get forever. The fleeting fullness that she feels. That was 3 weeks ago. Yeah. So, Joe, thanks. Yeah, go ahead. I mean,
I was just going
finish
to say, his wife knew Charlie purposely put himself in front of people who despised him. And he did it to engage debate. Alisyn, we need to do more of that. And again, we're on this road of political hate in this country. And the end of that road is political violence. That's what we saw yesterday. We've got to get off of this road.
Yeah. Joe,
So,
thank you very much. Really appreciate you sharing all of your personal thoughts on this.
and now on to our next guest. Jonathan Fahey was a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office for 17 years. He was also with the Department of Homeland Security and Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So, any sense who's behind this, and where does law enforcement even begin to deal with this?
Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, who's behind it? I don't know. I mean, I believe it's a political, it's politically motivated, but that doesn't really narrow the field anymore. And you do think what's interesting on a lot of these things, you think of the Trump assassination attempt or the attempts plural, the people were caught right away, and most crimes, are solved within a lot of times the first 24, 48 hours. And a lot of times if it's a violent crime like a murder, you already have sort of a natural bank of suspects that you go after. It might be family members, might be somebody that sort of has an enemy or something like that. So this could be really tricky. The fact that this person initially got away, I don't know what evidence they have. So it really is getting surveillance. The good news is now with everyone on their phones and lots more surveillance, there's a very good chance they have some sort of identification on this person, some sort of identification maybe on a car that he's in, and I expect he fled in a car. That would be the thing that makes the most sense. But yeah, it is like sort of where do you start on this thing, and it's that type of thing. They could also do things to isolate cell phones that are in the area to sort of track numbers, which is complicated, but you may be able to get a sense of that to track a cell phone number. But really, it is, hopefully, I'm hopeful they have some leads and they're honing in on it. But really, it is a complicated situation.
And changes when we find out that the shooter was not taken into custody right away. Now we've got hours and hours going by, so that I imagine makes this investigation all the more complex and complicated for those authorities who are trying to find him or her.
Yeah, exactly. It's that initial, what happens initially is so important, and it is more complicated. The good news is the resources that are going to be focused on this are enormous. You have the FBI, the state of Utah, so they are going to, scour, the earth, so to speak, to catch whoever did this. But again, you need evidence, you need leads to be able to do that. So, and I'm hopeful they have that.
Well, there are a couple of things that I think we know, though it's early hours and things have changed. Originally, they did say that they had a suspect in custody. Kash Patel, the head of the FBI, said that. That turned out not to be true. It was not it was not the suspect. They had to let the person go. But here's what I believe they think at the moment: one shot, only one shot fired. What does that tell you, Jonathan? I mean, that does that sound like a college student? And they believe it was from a building, so not in the crowd, from a building somewhere on campus. So does that put this person in a different category?
Yeah, I mean the fact that it's I think 200 yards away, it's a rifle shot. I don't think if somebody that has trained with a rifle, it's that difficult. But he did shoot. He didn't miss. So I do think that shows that one, it shows premeditation, it shows planning, it shows somewhat of a knowledge of guns and firing guns and things like that. So it doesn't seem like it was an impulsive act of a, I don't know that it's not a college student, but certainly, not sort of this impulsive act. Somebody just out of nowhere decided to shoot him. This seems like it was planned, and that makes sense. This was a planned event on campus, so all of that makes sense. But yeah, could it be somebody with some training? Certainly, it was a good shot, but it could just be somebody that has knowledge and some practice shooting a rifle. But yeah, the one shot thing, and maybe they may find a shell casing, they may not, but the types of things like that, they'll have a shell casing that, but to have that make any benefit for the shell casing, you have to then find the firearm, trace the firearm to the particular person. So again, it just seems like there's just so many, at least unknowns to us right now. Hopefully they're not unknowns to the people investigating.
All right, Jonathan Fahey, thanks so much for sharing your insights. We really appreciate it. And we're going to have much more on Charlie Kirk's killing. We're going to hear from a vice president of Turning Point USA, which Kirk co-founded when he was just 18 in 2012, a day after he graduated from high school. Plus, we'll talk about what this means for America, the right, the left, and the future of our country. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connecting America on this 24th anniversary of 9/11. And our coverage continues here. Tens of thousands of first responders and recovery workers, as we know, were on the ground at the World Trade Center back on 9/11. Many of them were there for days, weeks, breathing in that toxic dust and debris. 24 years later, medical experts are still studying the long-term impact to the workers. And joining us is Dr. Anita Dua, a vascular surgeon and founder of and chair of Healthcare for Action. Doctor, thanks so much for joining us on this anniversary. So help us understand how this kind of exposure can impact not just your lungs, but also your heart and your vascular system, your blood vessels.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here, but of course, talking about such a sad thing on this anniversary. Of course, we all remember it, so vividly. So initially, essentially, the way that the diseases impact the vascular system are all connected. The vascular system basically is like the pipes of your body, obviously carries blood where it needs to go. The biggest thing that we're starting to see, unfortunately, these days is that there are many patients that are having leukemias and other types of blood type diseases where they're not actually making what we call platelets, which are part of the blood system that actually allow you to form clot. Clot typically is bad, but usually you need clot to form in case you get an injury. And of course, in case you get an area where you want to make sure that your blood can flow properly, but also is not too thin. Otherwise, it can actually come out of the vascular system. And what we're seeing is because some of the exposure during that time, some of the chemicals that were in the air, and especially in people that were there repeatedly, who went back to ground zero to clean up or who were there helping victims, those patients are now starting to come out with different types of anemias where essentially the platelets and the red blood cells are not being formed in the vascular system. The other aspect of the vascular system specifically is the intense load on the circulatory system that is being formed by things like cancers. As you mentioned, people do have lung disease, for example, COPD, interstitial pulmonary fibrosis, things of that nature. And when that happens, unfortunately, we don't have enough flow going through the system because of the cancers that actually are taking away a lot of the nutrients and a lot you need to function.
And Dr. Dua, how is it possible for doctors 24 years after the fact to connect it to 9/11? How do you know when you see leukemia that it isn't just, a one that has grown organically? How are there some markers that you can tell that it's connected to 9/11?
Oh, it's a great question. Actually, there is a World Trade Center health program that the government has put into place and has been around for a really long time. And this program basically has people that actually determine whether or not there was a connection. And there are many ways to figure that out. It has to do with the normal way in which people would get leukemias and whether that particular patient would have necessarily gotten it if they had not had this extra exposure. Obviously, we err on the side of caution and ensure that the patient gets the benefit of the doubt. But there are up to 60 diseases now that are covered by this commission. And the reason that that's important, and there's an occupational health component to that as well, is because then the patients get not only the treatment covered, but also the ability to follow along as to, if they get something that occurs maybe 10 years out, the commission can say, yes, this is something that we cover. If you had exposure at 9/11, we already know that this is something that's connected back to that. And as a result, we'll cover you. Very similar to how patients at the VA are covered. If they were exposed, for example, to Agent Orange, there's certain things we know that are connected to that. And of course, if they also happen to be a smoker, we can say, well, your chances of getting lung cancer were this, but because you had Agent Orange and the fact that you're so young and you got this disease, it likely is that the Agent Orange contributed to where you are today. And so that's the way in which we determine it. I will say currently, there's a concern that there might be a pause on new diseases being covered. Most recently, uterine cancer has been covered as a new disease that can be attributable to some of the workers that unfortunately were at 9/11. But there's some new diseases that are being identified. And because there's been a bit of a pause, even though it's not been official, New York State, for example, has been pushing to say, hey, you guys need to be a bit faster and you need to make sure that these things are covered because people are dying, people are sick, and they can't go and get their health care if they're not covered appropriately.
Doctor, you're talking about a range of health issues. What warning signs should first responders or survivors, and really anyone with exposure to any of this type of polluted air, be watching for when it comes to their cardiovascular health?
So the most important thing is, now we're years out, and so people are going to be a little bit older. And like you rightly pointed out, and like was mentioned earlier, people are going to start to attribute some of these factors to just aging. And the number one thing is don't do that. It's not the patient's job to sort out what's wrong. It's the patient's job to just ensure that they come in front of a doctor and say that they were exposed. Because, if somebody just walks up and starts to talk about their disease process, maybe let's say somebody's, in their 60s at this point, and they come and say, hey, I had this bad cough that won't go away, and, I had the flu a month ago. Generally, if without knowing any other history, a doctor might say, oh, it might be just sequelae from that. But if you add to that, hey, by the way, I was also a responder on 9/11. I had multiple exposures to ground zero. Now suddenly it changes the game. Now suddenly, as a doctor, I'm going to say, hey, you know what? Let's not wait for that CT scan. Let's not wait for that X-ray. We need to get it now because this could be cancer. Because there's a phrase in medicine that when you hear hoofbeats, you need to think of horses, not zebras. In other words, rare diseases, odd diseases, they can be, but usually you want to think about common things. So common things being common, if someone has a cough, you want to think about the normal things that it could be. But if you add this element that, hey, I was a responder at ground zero, suddenly one of the common things, sadly, are lung cancers, the mesotheliomas, the fact that asbestos was around, and that caused, unfortunately, skin cancers along with many other issues. And so now a doctor will think, hey, I need to be a little bit quicker about checking out those diseases as well. So that's the advice that I would give to our patients, that just if you feel like something is wrong, don't wait, because especially in some of these bad cancers, we really need to get you taken care of quickly.
Just quickly before we let you go, if somebody is new to this and they realize, oh, now I have a health problem and they haven't been part of this health program, can they still join and still be part of it?
Oh,
To track
absolutely.
these? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So the way that it works is the health program is all about identification of the diseases. To the point that was made earlier, we couldn't just say after 9/11, hey, here are the 10 things that could happen to you. We didn't know. Some of the stuff has to do with inhalation of the particles. Some of the stuff has to do with exposure to the chemicals. Some of the stuff is mental, PTSD. Some of the survivors even, going through horrible things. And so the important thing is, as the diseases actually come out, us identifying them and then saying anybody who gets this, who was associated with this kind of exposure, we cover it and we care for you. And that's the government, doing their part. But as I mentioned, that program's really important. We can never forget, as we say about the event. And so never forget is ensuring that those who live through that are well taken care of. And that's all the way from they get early health care, they get coverage, they get treatment, and they get our benefit of the doubt that if they're sick today from that, we take care of them and we do the right thing.
Doctor, we
Dr.
thank you
Jewett,
so
thank you.
much. So much good information there for people who are dealing with the after effects of being down at ground zero. All right. Coming up next, we're going to speak with the CEO of an apparel company with a mission to help service members and their families. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connecting America, coming to you live from the Sunrise Diner here in Roselle Park, New Jersey, on this anniversary, the 24th anniversary of the attacks on the Twin Towers of 9/11, the attack on the Pentagon, and the plane that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. So many memories, Mark, come flooding back when you think back to that time. You were in a classroom teaching.
Right.
I was heading to work to Rock Center, and just told, get down to the studio, and we're just going to go on the air and try and kind of collectively hold each other's hands as we try to figure out what had happened.
Tell us more about what it was like to be a journalist on the day on the front line. It's so hard to watch. You're on the front line of history, watching this thing happening, but you feel that empathy for the suffering and what people are going through.
Yeah, it was surreal, I have to say, in a word. I was in an air-conditioned studio that first day. I went down to Ground Zero, and the days after that, actually went underneath Ground Zero, I think about a month later. And we're going to hear later on from a guest with Port Authority Police who helped make that happen. That really drove home the impact, because going underneath the Twin Towers a month afterwards, there were still cars in the parking garage. Some of them were damaged. The doors were open, and the subway station was still there. The subway car was still in the station. There was a restaurant that I recall. That's one of the fire captains who was lost on 9/11. And on that first night of the attacks, I met his brother, Michael Burke. We had hoped to talk to him this morning. We had some issues with his signal, but Michael Burke came to Rockefeller Center, came to WNBC. He, like so many, was hopeful that somebody knew where his brother was, right, Alisyn? There was so much uncertainty. That's Captain William Billy Burke of Engine 21. He, we know, went into the North Towers with his crew and many other firefighters. And he ended up staying behind because there were two civilians, one of whom was in a wheelchair. And he knew, and the other firefighters knew, in that part of the building, it was going to be hard to get a man in a wheelchair out of the building. So he stayed behind. They already knew that the South Tower had fallen. So it's assumed that Billy Burke knew the danger he was facing along with those other civilians. And there were other firefighters who did survive, because he said, "You guys go, I'll meet you at the rig." And he, of course, never showed up. That rig, Engine 21, is actually in the museum, Alisyn, at Ground Zero, the 9/11 Memorial Museum. Still,
Tim, that
there it
story,
is.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that story is so heartrending. It really makes me emotional to hear about it, because so many people in the towers, it dawned on them what their fate was in those final moments. And they, I mean, like Billy Burke, Captain Billy Burke had a choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, do I abandon this person in a wheelchair who will surely die
Mm-hmm.
to save myself? And the idea that he said to his, fellow firefighters, "I'll see you back at the rig," is
Mm-hmm.
so poignant to me, because we can assume he knew that he wasn't going to go back to that rig. And it just reminds me of the people on the airplanes as well, those final messages, some who were able to get messages out, who knew what their fate was on the Shanksville flight. And it's just really still profound and still so affecting 24 years ago. And as I was telling you guys, I was on my honeymoon at that time in Italy, and Tim and I were so obviously devastated and gutted. We went back to our little pension in Tuscany, and we're trying to figure out if we were going to go down and eat dinner. We finally, the people who owned the little pension said, "You need to eat," and we went down, and there were these two German girls who had just been on like a girls trip. And I still remember their names, Maren and Uta, because we bonded with them. They were at the next table. There were only the four of us in this restaurant. And for the next days, we all just palled around together, because we felt like we were living through this world disaster together. And they were devastated. The German girls were crying. The Italians were crying. I mean, all of Europe at that time, you remember the signs, "We stand with America." The whole world felt our pain on that day. And I will never forget that, seeing that up close.
At the same time, this is one of the worst days in the history of America, one of the worst days in the history of the world, and a day that had a terrible immediate impact on people's lives. But at the same time, in one of these worst days, you see some of the best behavior humanity can come up with in a moment like this, that sense of sacrifice. My grandfather was a New York City firefighter. And he always used to speak to me about, you never know when it can all end in a blink. And those men and women that day, they went into that building knowing that could happen, and they went anyway.
Yeah, it still makes you emotional. I mean, we talked yesterday about the PTSD of it all for so many people. We were kind of observers, right? All of us. We were not trying to save lives at Ground Zero, but it still impacts all of us who remember that day. I want to talk about a really interesting story that's kind of connected to this, an American company that's turning patriotism into purpose. It's an apparel company. It's called Volition America, and it donates part of its profits to Folds of Honor, which provides scholarships to the families of fallen and disabled service members. And Volition CEO and founder John Sapienti is joining us this morning with more. John, thanks so much for joining us. Tell us about Volition and more about your mission to support service members.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I think it's a very important day in our history, and I was coming on a lot to talk about the brand, but also about how America came together today. And I think it's very important. But to give you a little background, I started the brand about 10 years ago. Volition is the power of choice. So it's really, the brand is about choosing America and coming together as a country, and then giving back to our American heroes, first responders, and military through Folds of Honor.
So, John, are these all American-made apparel? Is that how this works? And then you give a portion of it for scholarships for first responders' kids?
Well, it's interesting because my day job is I own a couple manufacturing companies, so I'm not an apparel guy. So the brand really came to life as we did collabs with very large brands like Puma, Cobra, Marucci, Gurkha. So we partner with large lifestyle brands. So the clothes come from all over the world, wherever they make it. It's really about bringing people things to wear every day that the badge means something to them. So if you look at our logo, it's really the folded American flag with wings on it. Really, the idea of lifting it up and taking it places it couldn't go. And the idea of the collabs was really they already had large audiences and products people wanted. What they did is we call it volitionizing, but they infused patriotism into their brand with a cause. And that's really what we're doing is we're building a mission to, I call it uniting the country. I talk a lot about you can be far left and far right and love your country. So we're not red and we're not blue, we're red, white, and blue. So this mission is about bringing people together. And 9/11 to me, as you mentioned, you actually just mentioned it earlier about the people coming together around the world. It's a tribute to America that when, no matter how bad things are, all of a sudden we have these things happen and we come together. And yesterday's events for me were really disturbing because I really want people to come together and empower people to make better choices. And that's what this brand is. And we've got to stop all these bad choices and all this anger and open up our hearts to good. And that's what I'm trying to do with this brand.
John, as part of that mission, part of trying to get Americans together at a time when we're so driven apart, how did your company get involved with Folds of Honor and its founder, Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney?
No, I was actually a donor to Folds of Honor. So I got involved on Memorial Day. I spent the weekend with the troops and their families, and I was blown away why we're not helping them. And Dan had the idea of starting a patriotic brand that brings people together, empowers them with the power of volition, and then helps Folds of Honor bring awareness and money back to our fallen soldiers and first responders. So today, we're actually, everything we sell today, we're giving an additional amount of money back to New York first responder families was the goal. And so anything sold through all of our partners or anything sold through our sites, we're going to give an additional 10% right off the top, earmark it for New York City families for first responders to, help remember and celebrate such a terrible day in our history.
That's a fantastic gesture today, especially. So for anybody who's watching, where can they find this? Where do they need to go?
VolitionAmerica.com, and they'll find all of our products and all the story behind it and what we're trying to do. And I just encourage people to open up their hearts and come together. It doesn't matter what your opinion is. Listen to the other side and, let's love America the way we should.
Yeah, John, I mean, I'm so glad that you're saying that message, and you alluded to Charlie Kirk's assassination. It's devastating. I mean, as I think we all agree, heated political rhetoric leads to political hatred, leads to violence. And I don't know if you have any thoughts for how to take down the temperature.
No, I think there's so much focus on negativity. And I've said this a lot before. talking about things in a negative manner, you're eventually going to convince people around you of the negative imagery and the negative feelings. So we need to share more than just the negative. We need to share the positive. So if I tell you someone's a great person enough times, eventually you're going to see the good in people. And I think we really need to get away from the extreme left and the extreme right negative noise and really come together, the 90% or whatever it is, and say we're done with this and let's celebrate what's great about America. There's so many great things that we do as a country. I mean, the giving and how immigration and you can buy your bootstraps, build your American dream. Why are we not celebrating these great things? And I agree, we have warts and things to fix. I'm not discounting that, but it's still a great country, and we need to celebrate it and not have the hatred in our hearts.
People might hesitate to try to overcome that hatred. Do you think moments like this is what finally induces people to try to reach across the aisle, to try to make things better, to try to get to a brighter place in the dark moment we're in now?
I hope so. I don't think it's that easy where one event's going to cure everything. But the power of volition is the power of choice. So you can make choices every day to be happy, sad, love, or hate. And what we're trying to do is teach people to use volition in their life to make better choices. And if you wake up today, if we can get to one person or 10 people or 1,000 people and say, let's love in our heart today and let's remove some of the hatred and let's try to listen to the other side. And I think we'll eventually get there. So it's your responsibility, it's my responsibility. And I think all of us should understand that we can help control this by making a choice today. Let's choose to love each other and limit the hatred.
An inspirational message on this day of all days. John Sapienti, thanks so much for joining us, and we appreciate it. Yeah, words to kind of digest this morning as we deal with more violence in our country and some heated rhetoric. We'll be right back with more of Connecting America. Welcome back to Sunrise Diner here in Rosenfield Park, New Jersey. Alisyn, you see the sun out behind you. I'm just looking out the window here, and it's a beautiful sunny day, much as it was 24 years ago today here in the New York tri-state area. It was just bright blue skies. And speaking of the weather, let's check things out coast to coast with AccuWeather meteorologist Alex De Silva. Alex, good morning.
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
We are well. Thank you, Alex. How about you? What's going on? What are you taking a look at?
Yeah, well, the main change today was AccuWeather just released an update to our seasonal numbers for the hurricane forecast in the Atlantic Basin, and we adjusted the number of named storms and the number of hurricanes that we expect for the rest of the hurricane season. Not much of a change here, but we slightly decreased the high end of the number of storms. Originally, we were forecasting 13 to 18 named storms. Now we're going with 13 to 16 named storms. We've already seen 6 so far this year, and we dropped the number of hurricanes by 1, just by 1 here, from 7 to 10 to 6 to 9. And the reasoning behind that change was essentially this midsummer lull. There's just been a lot of dry air and a lot of shear, which has certainly been good news, keeping a lid on the tropical season. But we do expect things to change as we move into the second half of September and into October. And the big thing to note here is we did not change the number of U.S. impacts that we expect this year. We've seen 2 so far, with Chantal and Erin making a close pass by, but we are not changing the direct impacts to the United States. So even though there might be a storm or less on the total counter at the end of the season, we're still expecting a busy second half of the season, and we're still expecting potentially multiple U.S. impacts the remainder of the season.
Yeah, that's really interesting to see how you adjust all this stuff in real time, Alex. What's happening on the West Coast in the Pacific?
Yeah, well, in the Pacific, we actually are now tracking a tropical rainstorm out there right now. It's going to be moving up the coast of Mexico. No more Kiko, so Kiko is gone, but we are going to be watching the west coast of Mexico here over the next couple of days, as we're going to have a tropical rainstorm moving up along the coast, likely to become a tropical depression or tropical storm later today or tomorrow. So we're keeping an eye out for that, but luckily, it should stay offshore.
What's going on in the Gulf, though, Alex?
Yeah, we've been talking about this the last couple of days on your show here, but the Gulf, just bathtub water here. Look at this. Everywhere in orange and yellow on this map, in the entirety of the Atlantic Basin, most of it at least, has water temperatures near or above average. That's denoted here by the yellow and orange colors. But you can really see some of this deep orange color here in the Gulf. And in fact, a couple of days ago, we officially broke the record for the highest ocean heat content on record in the Gulf. And so what ocean heat content is essentially the amount of energy that's in the ocean. 2024 was the highest on record, and we just surpassed that right here. So you can see right up at the top here, the blue line is average. So you can see how much above average we are with that amount of energy in the Gulf. And so the concern as we go throughout the rest of the hurricane season is if we see anything enter into the Gulf, we really need to watch out, because that can allow for rapid intensification. We saw that with Milton and Helene last year.
As the hurricane season continues, what could this mean for the East Coast of the United States?
Yeah, well, currently right now we're tracking a couple of areas of interest right now, one off the East Coast. The good thing is there's a lot of wind here, a lot of hostile winds that should just rip this area apart. I do not expect development really to occur with this area. But now we have an orange blob way out in the Atlantic. That's the next tropical wave that we're going to be watching. Overall, it looks like it could be approaching the islands, in about a week's time or so, week to 10 days. So we're going to have to watch that very carefully. It's way too early to say if that's going to have no impact on the United States or if it could potentially bring an impact. We're a long way away, but like I said, we're expecting the tropical Atlantic to really come alive here in the second part of September, and we really want people to follow the forecast closely.
And
I don't like to hear about an orange blob.
Orange blob, yeah, exactly. Thanks, Alex. Watch out for the blob, Alisyn.
That's who I am.
Yeah, exactly. We're still thinking about where we were on this day 24 years ago, right? And we just talked about how it's a beautiful sunny day. Alisyn, you were sort of stuck in Italy on your honeymoon.
Well, happily in Italy. I mean,
Yeah.
I was it's a beautiful day. September 11th was a beautiful day in Italy as well. We were in Tuscany, and it was a gorgeous, gorgeous sunny day. That's my husband, Tim, and me. And we were, we had just come off this incredible high of our wedding, which was this epic wedding with all of our friends, and it was seen as a real moment of potential and promise and joyousness, and everyone was so happy. And then to have September 11th, happen nine days later, it felt, I remember feeling that day, we'll never recover. We will never, ever get over this. We'll never recover. We'll never celebrate again. We'll never be happy again. And I was wrong. I'm happy to say I was wrong. We have gone on to do all of those things, but I do still feel that something shifted in all of our lives, earth, mindset that day, and something was stolen from us. An innocence, a certain level of innocence was stolen from us, and we have become maybe more hardened since that day.
I talked to my nephews about this. They were
Yeah.
born in the late 90s and early 2000s, and the only world they know is the 9/11 world. They don't have the sense of safety and surety that we might have had in the world before then. This is what they expect, and that's a shame.
And yet, there's also, Alisyn. You have kids who are in college. There's a whole new generation who did not experience 9/11 and did not live through that. I'm wondering how your kids feel about this day, if they even talk about it at all.
They do talk about it.
Hmm.
It's theoretical for them because
Yeah.
they were born after it. But as Mark points out, they were born into a world where it had happened. So, in other
Hmm.
words, they were born into, in some ways, a less innocent world because now we could imagine something so heinous and so awful, which we couldn't imagine before 9/11. So, they do talk about it and they note it and they recognize that it was a huge scar, a world scar, but they don't obviously have the same kind of relationship with it that we do.
Exactly. All right, we are going to continue our coverage of 9/11 and this anniversary. And if you'd like to connect with us or follow us on social media, we are all over. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find us on our handles there at Connecting America TV or at Connecting America on TikTok. And the best of Connecting America also available every day wherever you get your podcasts. You just have to type in Connecting America in the search bar and you'll be able to listen to us there. We'll be back at the top of the hour as the diner fills up. We're going to talk to some folks who are joining us here this morning.
The views expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of USA Today or its affiliates.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Connecting America once again on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Mark Bonamo here at the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey. Alisyn Camerota joining us from home base this morning on this anniversary of 9/11.
Nice to see you guys. Nice
You
to hear
too.
your remembrances of what happened 24 years ago. Today, of course, does mark 24 years since the 9/11 terror attacks. Just to remind people, 2,753 people were killed when the planes hit the Twin Towers in New York. 184 other people were killed when another plane crashed into the Pentagon, and 40 people were killed on that Flight 93, which crashed into a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, after the passengers were able to wrestle control of it away from the terrorists. We're going to have full coverage of all of this and how the country is dealing 24 years later. But first, we do have the latest on the shooting of Charlie Kirk, which feels, Jim, somehow connected to all of the division that was sort of planted starting around 9/11.
Yeah, and the governor of Utah, Alisyn, is calling this a shocking political assassination. This morning, the country waking up to word that the killer has not been caught. There was word that a suspect was in custody late yesterday, but that person was released. Conservative activist and the founder of the organization Turning Point USA, that's Charlie Kirk. He was shot in the neck right in front of those thousands who were gathered to see him, talk to him, get his ideas on all sorts of issues at Utah Valley University there in Utah. Multiple videos of this shooting. In this world we live in, of course, they flooded social media. We saw those images of the crowd panicking and taking off. And it all kind of just unfolded on our phones, on our screens, almost in real time. Late last night, as we said, person of interest released. So the manhunt is underway this morning to find this shooter. 31-year-old Kirk emerged as a prominent right-wing voice. We know that. He attracted millions of listeners and followers, especially young people, on his social media, on his podcast. He was speaking at that event. It was a single shot that killed him. Police say now that the shooter wore some dark clothing and fired from a rooftop on campus across from where Kirk was seated under that tent, some distance away. Officials calling this a political assassination, as we mentioned. So when those shots were fired, pandemonium erupted. About 3,000 people were there right about lunchtime, 12:20. They locked down that university campus. Law enforcement agents carrying machine guns were searching the campus. And you have to wonder, Alisyn and Mark, this has changed life for those students at that campus for the rest of their career at that university. It's one of those seminal moments where it'll never
Oh,
be
I
the same.
agree. I mean, it also changes the life of for all of Charlie Kirk's,
Mm-hmm.
legion of followers. I mean, this is um, a huge moment because it's early days. We don't know the motivation of the shooter, but it feels like a political assassination. It's that what we do know, the information suggests that. And I mean, obviously, just talk to people from the '60s and how their lives were changed by the political assassinations. Then it's very scarring.
At the same time, it seems you look at this footage of students running away from a gunman and gunshots. This has become normalized in our society.
Yeah, we want to talk with somebody who's deeply involved in Kirk's organization. We're going to talk to Benji Gershon, Senior Vice President and Ambassador for Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization. Benji also runs American Jewish Conservatives. Benji, thank you for being here this morning. First of all, our condolences to all of you who worked with Charlie Kirk and knew him. You're in Dallas, where there's going to be a vigil today, right?
Yes, there's actually several vigils and events planned in Charlie's honor. It's a huge loss for the entire country, obviously for the Turning Point family, but this is a man of deep faith, conviction, of values, of principles, and it's a loss for everybody. This is a person at only 31 years old who accomplished unimaginable amounts of things in his time. We don't even know the impact really at this point of the amount of lives that he's touched during over his years. So this is it's a day filled with sadness. It's a day that's filled with a lot of emotion, anger. I'm talking to a lot of my friends and colleagues, and we're trying to figure out how do we channel this tragedy and turn it into something that something of strength, and something that unites the country and that brings people together in the aftermath of this, because this is clearly a political assassination. It's an attack on free speech. This is an individual who entire career was all about debate. I mean, there really was nobody like Charlie who would debate so eloquently and just be able to just challenge the other side's ideology and their positions, but in a way that was respectful, in a way that we could have dialogue in this country. And we've lost this. Effectively, they tried to silence that by taking out Charlie, but they've awakened the beast. Let me tell you, we're ready to go, and we're going to be louder and more proud, and this is going to only ignite a rallying call for the conservatives and those who value free speech and our conservative values in this country.
Charlie, I certainly understand the anger, and I certainly understand wanting to make this mean something and have this not be in vain, Benji. But what does that mean? They've awakened the beast. I mean, that causes a little bit of worry because we're in such a heated time.
Well, unlike the radical left, we're not into violence. We're into sharing ideas, and we're into sharing policy. And when it comes to silencing free speech, we can't allow political violence on either side of the aisle. I mean, it's not acceptable in this day and age. This has to be, no pun intended, a turning point in this country after this horrible incident, to where everyone's got to be accountable for what they're saying online, what they're saying to people, the media included. And I don't need to call out specific people, but there's parties that are guilty on all sides of the aisle who've been spewing things that shouldn't be said. That you would never say to someone's face, that's being said online and through other means. And the rhetoric needs to be toned down. I know it feels like a broken record. We always say that, but I think that now we've just reached that horrible point now in our history where we need to decide, what direction we're going to go to now as a civilization. And this is this can't stand anymore. We have to come together and be civilized human beings and actually have meaningful discourse, meaningful debate in this country again. Otherwise, where are we going to go? What's going to happen next?
But at the same time, those divisions between right and left are certainly still there. President Trump has spoken specifically about how much Charlie Kirk meant to him in terms of getting reelected in 2024. What made him so beloved by conservatives and so disliked by the left?
Because, it was disliked by the left because he was so effective. And when you have an effective leader who's able to speak to any audience about any myriad of topics. Remember, this is a man who did not go to college, extremely well educated, extremely intellectual. He cultivated the youth better than anyone in our time when it comes to political discourse. That's why they hated him on the left, and that's why Trump and the conservatives love him on the right. He was so effective in helping Trump get elected. He was extremely helpful in getting the youth vote out in the last couple of elections. So he was invaluable in that sense to conservatives and in delivering the message. And he made politics relevant for the youth. He made politics fun, and he made it engaging. And that's what people came to love about Charlie, and they wanted to see, especially at these public events like you saw on the college campuses. This is not like his first rodeo. He's touring around the country, something he's been doing for years. He knew the security concerns, but this man was a warrior. This man was a fighter. He was not going to allow any type of threats in any way, shape, or form to silence him. Unfortunately, we had the horrible tragic incident yesterday. Hopefully we'll find the shooter and the horrible person that did this. But this is, again, I think his voice and his organization, Turning Point USA, is only going to grow stronger as a result of this terrible tragedy.
Benji Gershon, thank you for being here this morning. Our condolences once again to you. And you have to wonder who will fill that void, who will be that next person who galvanizes the youth vote on the right. Is there somebody in the wings who will fill that void? I don't know. But we do
Yeah,
know
I don't know
this.
either. I mean, I just want to say one thing. His
Yeah.
wife, I feel like we should talk about her. She is a force in her own right on social media. She has her own, I would say, platform and message, which is less combative than Charlie's. But I'm just watching to see what her message will be going forward, and if she takes up some of the mantle.
We know that Kirk had a close relationship with President Trump. He announced the news of his death on Truth Social within hours of the shooting. He posted this photo on the White House Instagram account, and he also spoke about his friend from the Oval Office last night.
Charlie inspired millions, and tonight, all who knew him and loved him are united in shock and horror. Charlie was a patriot who devoted his life to the cause of open debate and the country that he loved so much, the United States of America. He fought for liberty, democracy, justice, and the American people. He's a martyr for truth and freedom, and there has never been anyone who was so respected by youth. Charlie was also a man of deep, deep faith, and we take comfort in the knowledge that he is now at peace with God in heaven. Our prayers are with his wife, Erica, the two young, beloved children, and his entire family, who he loved more than anything in the world. We ask God to watch over them in this terrible hour of heartache and pain. This is a dark moment for America. Charlie Kirk traveled the nation, joyfully engaging with everyone interested in good faith debate. His mission was to bring young people into the political process, which he did better than anybody ever, to share his love of country and to spread the simple words of common sense.
And our coverage of Charlie Kirk's murder will continue in our next half hour. We're going to hear from political strategist Jeanette Hoffman. Also, Dr. Jeff is going to be here. Jeff Gardier will weigh in on how to explain such a tragedy to young people, Alisyn. But we want to continue right now with our coverage of the anniversary of 9/11. And we are joined, as you can see here at the table, by retired Port Authority Police Lieutenant Mark Winslow, right here, and some visitors he's become accustomed to seeing every year at this time, retired police officers Bob Gutowski and Rick Lavka of Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Yes, welcome to New Jersey, gentlemen. We are so happy to have you here. Mark, let's start with you. Lieutenant Winslow, retired. First of all, happy birthday to you. I know 9/11 is your birthday. And there's a significance to that because on that date, you had taken the day off from Port Authority Police. How did you hear about what happened, and where did you then go in the immediate moments after the Twin Tower was hit?
Well, Jim, I was actually working that day up at the George Washington Bridge.
Okay.
Somebody had called out sick, and I was sort of a specialized force that went to different locations to cover people who were out sick and on vacation. So it happened, 9/11 happened. I was talking to my wife, and I said, I heard something, I could hear the blast. And I looked out the window of my office at the George Washington Bridge, and we're sort of on an elevated roadway, and I could see the Trade Center burning. Immediately made some calls, mobilized some persons, police officers, and sent them down there. So I was up there for a good 12 hours that day.
And then you were there for 12 hours, and then you stayed. I mean, after the horrible attack, you then were part of the cleanup there at World Trade Center. How long were you there? What do you remember from those days?
When I was up at the bridge that day, they mobilized everybody, the whole job, people on vacation, people were off. And so the next day, I got down to Ground Zero around 4 o'clock in the morning. And I was told I was being assigned there for a lengthy period of time. I did not know I would be there for a year and a half. I was there every day till May, and then sporadically after May, after the site closed, but there was still work to do. So I was down there till I retired in 2003.
Oh, we talked a little bit about you were there every day for a year and a half. Your health is okay, right? at this point?
Some minor things
Okay.
we're just looking at, but everything is okay. Yes.
We actually met in those days after 9/11 down at the site, at the pile, as it was known. And there we are, Mark, when we were a lot younger,
Yes.
less gray hair, underneath the towers. Talk to us about where we were at that point.
You had shown an interest. You wanted to come down to the site, Jim, and I took you underneath where there were parking lots, underground parking lots, PATH train station down there. There's a subway station, some stores, restaurants. There's a whole mall in the Trade Center also. We showed you part of that.
I remember glasses still on the counter at the restaurants, bottles of beverages still out. It was just frozen in time.
Yeah. I remember that too. So Officer Lofka, to explain how you from Sheboygan got involved here in 9/11.
We got involved shortly after the attack. We started a fundraiser for all the first responders who had died. It was the weekend after the event. And at that time, we did a brat fry, which is very traditional for Wisconsin.
A brat, like as in bratwurst,
as in
right?
bratwurst.
For those East Coasters who aren't
Right.
familiar, right?
Right.
Okay.
And we, it started out was just going to be local, as in our police department. I was on the police department at that time for Sheboygan Police. And it expanded very rapidly to the entire county. So eventually, all the volunteer fire departments, all of the police departments, county sheriff, etc., started it, and then all of the grocery stores in the county gave food and condiments, etc. And we raised money for all the people who died that day that were in first responder roles at the time. We contacted the Port Authority Police Department, and they were able to get us all the names, and we were able to get personal checks written out for each family member that we had received their information about them, and that's how we started.
And you guys came to Ground Zero at a certain point to hand deliver those checks, right?
My wife and I, we came in December 18th, which that day was significant because that was the first day that the people who had been evacuated out of the area could move back in. And so we came on that first flight. We had a Port Authority officer pick us up at our hotel and take us down to Ground Zero. And then we gave the checks for the Port Authority officers and for the New York officers. Fire department representative came and gave the checks to the fire department and ambulance personnel that died.
And Officer Gutowski, just tell us what you remember from those days of connecting with the New York first responders and officers.
It was definitely overwhelming. I guess to be invited to be a part of it. On the 6-month anniversary, we actually, half of us, there were 6 officers. We half flew and half drove, and we brought grills along, and we had a brat fry, a traditional brat fry for the workers
at Ground Zero.
At
right?
Ground Zero.
I think we have some pictures of that. I don't know if we can throw them up for people to see.
I got able to meet the officers and to actually experience, I guess, what they went through. It was humbling, I think, for me.
Can we get back to, you did some math, Mark, about the amount that was raised, and each family got an individual check for over $500 from the funds raised from your brat fries. So that equals out to over what?
It was over $200,000 that I realized that they had raised for the 343 firefighters, the 37 Port Authority police officers, the 23 New York City police officers that passed away.
By the way, this is the poster that you brought this morning. This is just the Port Authority officers who were lost.
And some other first responders that lost their lives that day. And that was a substantial amount of money. So I was very surprised and very happy that, there were people thinking about everybody down at Ground Zero.
Yeah, and I remember Officer Lovka, the just tremendous outpouring of love and support at that time for first responders and firefighters and police. And there would be a fire truck that would go down the street in New York, and people would just be out on the street, applauding them. And here again, it was that goodwill in the days and months afterwards that I do feel as though we've gotten a little bit away from now. What are your thoughts 24 years later?
My thoughts are, I don't think people realize from the beginning. I didn't think people in other areas of the country realized how impactful it was and how much damage was actually done from the first day we were there till now. It's just so impressive, but yet we don't really think about it as much as we should.
Bob, why is it important for you to come back all these years later, every year, and see Lieutenant Winslow?
Well, it's just to see Lieutenant Winslow, but also to pay our respects. I mean, we feel like after being here for the brat fry, that we actually feel like we were part of it. I guess that it's just nice to come back and pay our respects.
Yeah. What are your thoughts 24 years later, Officer Gutowski, about where we are?
It's, I guess if you're wondering, people, they said we'll never forget that. I think some have, and I think like Rick said, I don't think a lot of people realize the devastation, and we were here, we were a part of it. We were down in the pit, and we were here for the 1-year anniversary, and I felt special that I was able to be a part of it, but yet I don't think I deserved to be, because I was not a part of what actually happened.
But through your efforts, you helped so many of the families. You will go to Ground Zero later today? Right?
Yes, we will, yes.
And that's something you do every year?
Every year.
After the ceremony is finished, then you go when it's
correct.
a little quieter?
Yes.
And where do you go there? Do you just look at the memorial? Do you go down into the museum? What do you do when you're there?
We'll go and at the reflective ponds. I mean, we'll just kind of stand and observe, and just I guess sit and just watch everybody, and just pay our respects.
And Mark, one of the things I like to think about on this day is some of the good Alisyn that came out of such a terrible tragedy, and the fact that we met as doing our jobs. You as a police officer, myself as a reporter, and 24 years later, we're still in touch. Our families know each other, and so that's some good that came out of something terrible, right?
Yeah, a lot of bad happened that day, but yes, there was a lot of connections with people all over the country. I've gotten numerous letters and people from all over the country that didn't even come down. I may have spoke to them, I may have given them a tour, I may have showed them something, and it's fabulous, some of the letters that have sent me.
Jim, I'll tell you one thing that'll stick with me from this conversation. The vision of half of the Sheboygan Police Department driving across country with grills in their car
isn't that
for
amazing?
the Brat Fest in New York. I mean, that's such a symbol of the camaraderie, of police officers and of Americans that day.
Do you have a special recipe, by the way, for the brats? Do you first soak them in beer, for instance, or is there a magic
sauerkraut, mustard? What is it?
See, we're not the sauerkraut type here. This is just a brat with the condiments on it, the double brat, a hard roll, so that those double brats it fills up the whole roll. But you put them in water first, then you cook them. And what we usually do is, after they're off the grill, then they're in a pot with a little bit of beer.
Right.
But we tried that at Ground Zero, and Mark said, no
alcohol.
No beer. So no beer in the brat container at Ground Zero.
Have you had one, Alisyn? Have you enjoyed a brat?
I don't. Maybe at some point, but I'm certainly tempted right now. I mean, is the grill happening today that I could rush down for?
Sorry,
they're off today.
Yeah,
well deserved. And we really appreciate you coming in here to the diner to talk to us on such a very special and important day. And Alisyn, I know we all join in saying thank you for your special effort just to do something from so far from the tri-state area and continuing to remember this special day. And Lieutenant Winslow, once again, happy birthday to you.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up after a short break, Rudy Giuliani was known as America's mayor. You remember him, right, Lieutenant Winslow, after his response to 9/11. Coming up next, the man who literally wrote the book on Giuliani is going to join us right here at the diner. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Connecting America Live from the Sunrise Diner in Roselle Park, New Jersey. We thank you for joining us on this somber anniversary, the 24th anniversary of 9/11, Alisyn.
Absolutely. And Jim, I mean, you can't think about that day, 9/11, without thinking about Rudy Giuliani. He was such a
Absolutely.
comfort.
Yeah.
He was such a comfort to so many of us and to Americans and to the world. I mean, his words during that time.
Yeah, his quick response, his leadership during the attacks. A lot of people maybe had forgotten about that or don't remember, don't know about that side of Rudy Giuliani. He was known as America's mayor. Years later, he aligned with Donald Trump.
Yes, and I would say that his reputation has been tarnished by that alignment, certainly by his role in the rally, the January 6th rally, as well as his debunked claims of election fraud in 2020. In fact, his wealth was decimated by having to defend himself against a number of civil and criminal cases against him because of all of that. And less than 2 weeks ago, we should mention, Giuliani was seriously injured when a car smashed into a parked SUV that he was in. This was on a New Hampshire highway. And after that, President Trump announced that he would honor Giuliani as a, quote, great American patriot by awarding him the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Yeah, one person who knows the former mayor very well is author and political commentator Andrew Kurtzman, who's written 2 books about the former mayor. Andrew, thanks for being here at the diner with us this morning.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jim.
Back to 9/11, that day, you were right there alongside Mayor Giuliani, covering him as a reporter, right, for New York.
Sure. Well, it's just amazing to think that was a quarter century ago, or almost a quarter of a century ago. And I guess, the world has moved on, and even those who are down there kind of moved on. But a day like this really kind of brings everything back. And that morning, I was sleeping. It was early in the morning. My mother woke me up and told me to, frantically telling me to turn on the television. Saw it was happening. I was working as a reporter for New York One News at the time. My news director just shouted, go find Rudy, a political reporter. And so I guess I kind of terrorized the taxi driver, raced me down to the World Trade Center. And he kind of slammed on the brakes at one point. He's like, get out.
Can't go any further.
Can't go any further.
Yeah.
And I found myself on this kind of decimated street because one of the towers had already fallen. And, police officer wanted to chase me off the street. I said, I'm sorry, I'm a reporter. I have to find Giuliani. And he said, oh, Giuliani's right there. And just by utter coincidence, Giuliani was standing there, covered in dust with his aides. And, he saw me and he said, Andrew, let's go. And we proceeded to kind of do this nomadic trek up Church Street, looking for a place to relocate city government. And kind of during that trek, the North Tower fell. And there was kind of this hurricane of ash and debris, and it started chasing us. And Giuliani and I and his entourage just started bolting up Church Street to escape it. It was a pretty extraordinary morning.
Andrew, that is extraordinary. And just looking back at these videos of that day, Giuliani at that day and in the days after was such a calming presence. He was really seen as a steady hand. He was seen as a uniter. I remember the things that he said seemed almost poetic at that time. I remember at one point, maybe on that day, I think a reporter said to him, how many people have been killed? And he said, we don't have the numbers yet, but however many it is, it will be more than we can bear.
Right.
And I mean, that's always stuck with me. And so now how do you square, I would say steady hand, rational, those are not the adjectives, now associated with really Giuliani. How do you square the man that we have seen for the past, say, 5 years or 10 years with the man that day?
Yeah. I mean, the key question about Giuliani was kind of what happened to him, right? I mean, a whole generation of people have kind of, but grown up who don't even remember the days when Giuliani was a national hero, who only know him as the person who has been disbarred in 2 states, who has been faced a $150 million defamation case, who triggered 2 impeachments for Donald Trump in his first term, one in the Ukraine scandal, then in the election scandal. He's still under indictment. I mean, he's a different person now. And, the question is, what happened to Giuliani? I think the answer is desperation. I think it was a desperation for power and money that he exploited as best as he could. He made something like $100 million in a consulting firm, capitalizing on his 9/11 stature. And then kind of watch it all come tumbling down when he ran for president in 2008. It was a disastrous candidacy.
And I know in your book you talked to his ex-wife.
Oh yeah, sure.
And she also points to that moment when he lost, when he had to, pull out of the race for president,
right?
And how devastating that was on him, and turned to alcohol.
That's right.
She said
he fell into a deep depression. Started drinking heavily. Donald Trump came to his rescue, kind of took him to Mar-a-Lago to kind of chill out, I guess, for well over a month. And, that thus began kind of the future of Giuliani and Trump. And, he cast his lot with Donald Trump. And in many ways, he sold his soul to Donald Trump. I mean, he always considered him a carnival barker, according to one of Giuliani's aides. But to this day, Giuliani is, fiercely loyal to Trump. And why not? I mean, Trump brought him back out of the wilderness, made him the presidential, attorney, gave him all of this power, and that led to 2 impeachments. And now, Giuliani is, a fallen hero, to say the least.
Now, you also
And
talk.
yeah, go ahead.
You're also talking
Go ahead, Mark.
about Giuliani fancying himself as this Roy Cohn figure, this iconic attorney in
Right.
Donald Trump's closest orbit. But it's also said Trump turned his back on Cohn when he's dying of AIDS. Now, Trump is planning to bestow the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the nation's high civilian honor, on Giuliani, a now disbarred and discredited 2020 election denier, Rudy Giuliani. Why?
There's a very strong bond that Donald Trump has with Giuliani, and he's stuck with Giuliani through some of the worst debacles and embarrassments. You remember the Four Seasons embarrassment, the dripping hair dye, and all through that, Trump remained, had a large reservoir of respect for Giuliani for what he accomplished as mayor, and kind of an affection for him. Giuliani was not brought back into Trump's second term. I think he was so disgraced, and I think he was too much of a liability. But Giuliani was in a terrible traffic accident recently. And I think that feeling of loyalty, love, whatever you call it, came back to Trump. And he said, okay, we're going to give Giuliani the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And I don't know. I mean, Giuliani has fallen into such irrelevance that it was kind of a poignant thing that Trump would bring him back kind of one last time, right, to give him some measure of respect.
And Andrew, as you say, he's still in trouble. Giuliani is not out of the woods. I mean, not just medically, but in terms of legally, what's going to happen to him with all of these various cases and his, lack of money and all of that?
Right. Well, he's still under indictment in Georgia and in Arizona. I believe the Arizona case is scheduled to go to trial in January. It hasn't gotten a lot of attention yet. So he's still in jeopardy. I guess he's avoided federal charges because of Donald Trump's election and the Justice Department dropping the special investigation. Giuliani was named as an unnamed, he was an unnamed co-conspirator in the indictments. So I think that problem has gone away. But, he's still in a world of trouble.
You talk about his sort of lust for power and trying to stay relevant, but in the foreword, I think, of your book, there's a quote from him when he's asked about what he hopes his legacy will be, and he said something like, "I don't care, I won't be here, or I'll be dead."
Right.
Does that ring true to Rudy Giuliani, or?
In a way, it does. One of the things, I've been covering Giuliani since, oh my goodness.
Don't do the math, Andrew.
Decades.
It makes us all feel very
decades. And one of the things that was always so fascinating about him is that he didn't really care what people thought. And in many ways, that made him a good mayor, right? He didn't capitulate to criticism, right? He stood his ground on some very important things that did some very good things for New York City. But, that kind of indifference to what people thought of him kind of inoculated him from introspection into what was right and what was wrong. And in Giuliani's book, he's right, everyone else is wrong. And that got him into terrible trouble over the years.
Yeah, I mean, we should mention, 9/11 also in some ways turned around his reputation. Before 9/11, he wasn't necessarily seen as a very level-headed, almost poetic leader. He was quite controversial. And to your point, Andrew, he courted controversy. And he did some of these things, these programs like the broken windows and all of that, the squeegee guys, all of that stuff that supporters loved, but critics thought could, be racist. And so his reputation was in some ways made or saved by 9/11 because the man met the moment and he stepped into the need for a leader who could speak so articulately when some people felt that President Bush wasn't taking up that mantle. And
Right.
now I don't know if you feel like this desperate desire for relevance is more of like the old Giuliani before 9/11.
I mean, look, Giuliani has been famous since the days of his work as a U.S. attorney. Extremely polarizing figure with extraordinary accomplishments. I mean, you know, he's got a lot of credit for turning New York City around in one of its darkest moments. It was, you know, it's exaggerated to a large extent, but there's a lot of credibility to it. He did do extraordinary things from New York City, and it was kind of my way or the highway, and made a lot of enemies. He triggered so many racial controversies, and he was criticized as having racist political tactics, police tactics, no question about it. But by the end of his term, pre 9/11, I think New York was kind of exhausted by him, but not. He wasn't discredited then. I think it was just kind of his time to leave. And sure enough, 9/11 happened, and the rest is history.
Andrew, do you think there's an overarching lesson to his rise and fall?
I mean, I think Giuliani was a singular figure. But I think the lesson is, that the lust for power and money, which is an age-old story, will compromise a man of principle.
We'll leave it there. Andrew Kurtzman with such great insight on Rudy Giuliani as you covered him over the years. We're not going to say how many years it's been. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Yeah, we were kids.
Yep.
24 years ago.
Welcome back to Connecting America as we look at a live view right across from Ground Zero on the grounds of St. Paul's Chapel in New York City in Lower Manhattan. Coming up in just about a minute or so at 8:46 this morning, that bell will ring, marking the moment when the first of those two planes hit the World Trade Center Twin Towers. The South Tower was the first at 8:46 a.m., Alisyn.
Yeah, it's so amazing to see the actual timeline of all of this, because the second plane hit the North Tower at 9:03. I guess I'd forgotten that there was that 15 minutes in between there.
Let's listen in.
And let's just take this time before we begin in silence to remember all of those who have fallen. Let us pray together. Lord, make us instruments of your peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Granted, we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.
Moving ceremony there. And Alisyn, remember that St. Paul's was unscathed, just right across the street, all that destruction, and not even a pane of glass was broken at that church, which became a refuge for the first responders. They would sleep in the pews there in the days and weeks following 9/11.
I'd forgotten about that remarkable miracle. But again, the timing, when I look at the timeline, it brings back the feeling of that day, because the first plane hit at 8:46 a.m., the South Tower. And that was just a shock, as you both remember. What was that? That seems horrible, but that was a mistake of some kind. And then when the second plane hit the North Tower at 9:03, it started to sink in that something apocalyptic and awful was happening. And then with the Pentagon at 9:37, I mean, again, in real time, all of our brains were just trying to figure out what we were seeing. And again, because I was on my honeymoon in Italy, we were rushed into this coffee shop where some of the Italians were giving us ice water and sitting with us and watching. And we were just watching a live feed of CNN, and the tower came down. And that was such I'll just never forget the body blow of seeing that and realizing, oh, our lives will never be the same. again after this.
Yeah, I remember that questioning sort of feeling. And we were in a tower too. We were in Rockefeller Center, a landmark building, and so much uncertainty. Is it over? Is this the last of it? And just waiting for the next shoe to drop. Yeah. All right. We'll continue our coverage of the anniversary of 9/11. Another big story, though, that we're following, our coverage of Charlie Kirk's murder yesterday. And political strategist Jeanette Hoffman is joining us here on Connecting America this morning. Jeanette, thanks for being here. Talk to us about the reaction to this, particularly in Congress, at the House, the U.S. House, after Charlie Kirk was shot. We saw that request for a moment of prayer for Charlie Kirk, and then it kind of descended into some shouting.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is a national tragedy at a time where our country feels so divided on the right and on the left. What happened with Charlie Kirk, I think so many of us are mourning him, his actions, what he's done as a patriot, and his feeling for his poor family, his very young family. This is a 31-year-old man who didn't deserve to die. Um, Talking about the political reaction, I think there are those who feel like their rhetoric against people like Charlie Kirk and against Republicans have been so heated to the point that the desensitization, the dehumanizing of Republicans, calling them Nazis, calling them fascists, all that kind of all those words contributed to the violence against someone like Charlie Kirk. And not to say that political violence does not happen against the left. It does. We saw the Minnesota legislators, the violence against them. We saw, Nancy Pelosi's house was broken into. Gretchen Whitmer was kidnapped. But lately, I think there's a feeling that the rhetoric against President Trump and his followers has been increasingly violent and desensitizing and using words that should never be used against American politicians.
Yeah, I don't think either side has a monopoly on the, heated political rhetoric. I think that, we're certainly living in a time where in tremendous vitriol. And it was interesting. We talked to Joe Walsh, former congressman, former Tea Party congressman, briefly MAGA, before he decided that he wanted to leave the MAGA mindset and become a Democrat. He was good friends with Charlie Kirk. He was a mentor to him. And he said that Charlie Kirk leaned into it. I mean, as we know, he said provocative things. He said extremist things. He was always, though, open to discourse. He invited debate from people who disagreed with him. He had a banner that said, "Prove me wrong," and would talk or debate anybody. Jeanette, what do you think it was about him that so appealed to young men, particularly some teenage and college age men right now?
Because he was effective, Alisyn. He would bring the debate to college campuses, and he wouldn't talk at people, he would talk with people, and he would really spur a meaningful debate with young people, with people his age, because he was a young person as well, right? I mean, when he started Turning Point USA, he was quite young, and his organization was full of young Republican activists, young conservative activists. And, you don't have to take my word for it. Look at Pew Research polls. In the past several years, the trending of young males and Gen Z moving to the Republican Party has been a 40-point swing, and that's really dramatic. And I can definitely attribute that to the work of Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk to bring young people into the Republican Party and talk about issues that have never been talked about on college campuses that usually tend to lean left.
Where do you see this void being filled by someone who comes along behind Charlie Kirk? Are there other young people, you think, who will be able to adequately appeal to that generation and pick up the mantle where he has left off?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think, listen, that is the beauty of what Charlie Kirk did. He built this organization, Turning Point USA, that was full of young people, motivated people. And I think his death, as horrible and untimely as it is, will spur more people into action. And, what he said was, if we don't talk and we don't communicate and we don't have discourse and disagreement, it will lead to political violence. And unfortunately, that can't happen. this needs to be foreshadowing a turning point in our nation where we engage in more civil debate and not resort to political violence.
All right, Jeanette, thank you for being here in the aftermath of this horrible shooting. We appreciate it. And we'll be right back. Welcome back to Connecting America. And with all the news this morning, we are going to extend our program right through 10 a.m. And coming up, we'll talk to people here in the diner and to our own Dr. Jeff Gardier. Also, political analyst Jim McQueenie will be here. And we'll hear from another member of Charlie Kirk's Turning Point organization when we come right back here on Connecting America.
The views expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of USA Today or its affiliates.
Good morning and welcome back to Connecting America on the USA Today streaming channels. I'm Jim Rosenfield alongside Mark Bonamo here at the Sunrise Diner in Roosevelt Park, New Jersey. There's Alisyn Camerota joining us from home base this morning. We thank you all for being here. Such a busy morning. We actually added an hour to our show, Alisyn.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's so much news. I mean, obviously we want to take time to reflect on where we are 24 years later after 9/11, and then of course the huge news about the murder of Charlie Kirk.
And you know, as we look at the clock, Alisyn, it's coming up on 9:03. That's the time when the second plane, Flight 175, crashed into the South Tower at Ground Zero. Of course, all those passengers aboard that plane were killed instantly. An unknown number of people in the tower, that South Tower.
And
Also
then just
impacted.
to take everyone through the rest of the timeline, at 9:05, President George W. Bush was in an elementary school classroom. I think we'll all remember the video there. He was in Florida. He's informed in his ear about the hit of the second tower. His chief of staff, Andrew Card, whispers in the president's ear, and President Bush later said, "I made the decision not to jump up immediately and leave the classroom because I wanted to project a sense of calm." You remember he was reading to young school kids. At 9:37 a.m., Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon in Washington. All the passengers on board were instantly killed, and so were 125 civilian and military personnel in that building. And then at 9:45 a.m., that's when the U.S. airspace was shut down, and it was called at that time Operation Yellow Ribbon. And then at 10:02, we all remember Flight 93 plowed into an empty field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. As we learned, it was the passengers on board who took the controls from the hijackers because the passengers feared that the hijackers were headed to another, national monument, and that they were trying to kill more people.
It's not starting. It unfolded in real time when we talk about those moments in time, but it felt like an instant when you think back to all of those different places of impact. We want to turn to the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's killing because there's a news conference that's getting underway, we understand, at Utah Valley University, and that will include the special agent in charge of the FBI there and also the Department of Public Safety officials there as we get ready to listen in at that event. Obviously, they're still getting ready for those officials to assemble there after Kirk's stunning assassination outside at an event where thousands of young people were gathered to hear from Kirk yesterday afternoon when that single shot rang out and hit him in the neck.
Yeah. Just let me know. I can't see the press conference, but just let me know.
We will,
That
yes.
was, yeah.
We
No,
will.
it was. I have to tell you guys, I've not been able to watch that video, and I don't know that I ever will. The violence, I was gutted just hearing about it. My 18-year-old son looked up yesterday afternoon and said, "I think Charlie Kirk was just shot." And even just that, hearing that news, I was gutted. And again, this is not anyone I knew personally, but I did know that he was a young man, 31 years old. I did know that he had, somewhere in the recesses of my mind, that he had a young family. I did, of course, know that he is a huge figure in right-wing politics and that he's had a tremendous effect on young Republican men in this country and swaying some who had no political affiliation over to becoming conservatives. And it was just such again, a body blow. I mean, I'm using the same terms as I did for 9/11 because it's hard not to see this at the moment as a political assassination. It's early days. Maybe it will turn out to be something different, but it feels as though this is a result of this very vitriolic moment that we're living in.
We saw a photograph as you were speaking, Alisyn, of him with his wife and his two young children. We have to remember he was a father, he was a husband. They are now without their dad, and his wife is now a widow in that incident that changed their lives yesterday. His wife, Erica, and their two children, very young. He was, as you said, only 31 years old, and had made such a name for himself. And I'm interested, Alisyn, when your son heard that Kirk was shot, was he somebody that he followed, that he knew well, or just he knew the name?
He's not someone whose worldview aligns with my son's worldview, but he knows his name, because I think it's hard to be an 18-year-old guy in this country and not know his name. That said, some of it is geographical, some of it is obviously which political circle you run in. Our wonderful intern here, Ainsley, went to Syracuse University, which is a very liberal campus. She did not know, she's 22. She did not know of Charlie Kirk, but my son, being 18, did know of him and just reported the news to me in a shocking fashion. And I too was shocked. I mean, it's funny how much his name and what he represents has seeped into our national consciousness, because again, I felt gutted when I heard that, because I just instantly understood or believed what we were seeing, that it was bigger than just a random crime against Charlie Kirk.
You know, your son's part of this rising generation who's one day going to run the country. Is he struggling to make sense of all this like we all are?
Yes, I mean, my son is not terribly politically engaged or active. He's, I think, focused on figuring out his own path. But yes, I mean, when there's somebody who is this high profile of a human and a young person to be shot, I mean, to be the victim of what looks like political violence, it's hard not to be affected by this for everyone.
Yeah, and we're monitoring this news conference because the key question is, where is the shooter? Shooters at large, unless these officials are coming out this morning to update us with any new information on that. There's a manhunt underway, as far as we know. We've not yet heard anything that would let us know that they've actually made progress in finding the shooter. All right, we want to now turn to Justine Murray, who's an ambassador with Turning Point USA, also works for Media Research Center in D.C., a media watchdog group looking out for conservative interests. Justine, we have to say, first of all, our condolences, and we appreciate you taking time out to join us here on Connecting America. Talk to us, first of all, about, all right, I understand that we're having some issues with the audio. She can't hear us, but we'll be interested to find out more about, their relationship, two young people working for this very impactful organization, Alisyn.
I also do want to hear what she thinks his secret sauce was. How was it that Charlie Kirk did end up resonating with so many young men? I mean, I know a little bit about what he espoused. I know a little bit that he was, he had gotten more conservative over the years in terms of his morals, his religion, not just politically, but he really felt that, he said a lot of provocative things, and he felt that women, in particular, young women, should devote themselves more to finding a husband and having children than having careers. So I look forward to talking to Justine about, if how that message resonates with young women also. But he also was a role model for young men, because he talked about the role of being a husband and how big and important a role being a husband and a father was. And I think, based upon social media, he modeled that for a lot of young men.
All right, Alisyn, we're going to pause here for a moment. We hope to hear from those officials on the ground in Utah. We're monitoring the beginning of that news conference, so we'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Connecting America. This is a news conference coming to us live from Utah Valley University. Let's listen in if we can.
They will be providing some updates as well as a recap of what happened here at Utah Valley University yesterday. We will be able to take a couple of questions after they are done speaking, but it will be short in order to stay in tune with the president speaking at 9:45. So I'll go ahead and introduce Commissioner Bo Mason.
Good morning. I am Bo Mason, Commissioner for the Utah Department of Public Safety. I'd be remiss if we didn't start off today and recognize the significance of the day. Historically, on 9/11, law enforcement has come together as a group to recognize and honor those that sacrificed to preserve the ideals of this country, the freedoms of this country. And instead, we find ourselves today hunting a murderer who chose to violate our rights, the rights of an individual within this country. Just to recap yesterday's events, at around 12:20 p.m., political influencer Charlie Kirk was at Utah Valley University participating in a student-sponsored event with Turning Point USA. Charlie was shot at that event. He was transported to a local hospital where he later passed. Last night, his body was moved to the state office of the medical examiner. We will continue to facilitate movements to get him home today and with his family. Yesterday, during the investigative process, we located a couple of persons of interest. We interviewed those individuals, and after releasing them and after clearing them of being suspects, they face scrutiny. They face threats. We asked the public to be patient with the investigative process. These individuals were not suspects. They were people of interest. We ask that you do not impose into those people and that investigative process. They don't deserve that harassment for being subject to that. I'd like to thank all the investigators that are involved in this. They have worked around the clock. All day yesterday, through the night last night, investigators from the State Bureau of Investigations, from county, from city agencies, the university, our federal partners with the FBI, the ATF, and many others. Those are just a few of the people that we have involved in this. I'd like to thank all of them for their strong work. Through all that work last night, we were able to make a few breakthroughs. We were able to track the movements of the shooter. Starting at 11:52 a.m., the subject arrived on campus, shortly away from campus. We have tracked his movements onto the campus, through the stairwells, up to the roof, across the roof to a shooting location. After the shooting, we were able to track his movements as he moved to the other side of the building, jumped off of the building, and fled off of the campus and into a neighborhood. Our investigators have worked through those neighborhoods, contacting anybody they can with doorbell cameras, witnesses, and have thoroughly worked through those communities, trying to identify any leads. We do have good video footage of this individual. We are not going to release that at this time. We are working through some technologies and some ways to identify this individual. If we are unsuccessful, we will reach out to you as the media and we will push that publicly to help us identify them. But we are confident in our abilities right now, and we would like to move forward in a manner that keeps everyone safe and moves this process appropriately. Last night I communicated with Erica. The family's devastated. As a commissioner of public safety, as a father, as a husband, I can only imagine what that family's going through. The heinous event that happened yesterday is not Utah. This is not what we're known for. Over the past several weeks, we've seen this state come together to help families in mourning, come together as a community to show what Utah is known for a state of character, of service, of camaraderie, of a neighboring feel. We will not stand for what happened yesterday. We are exhausting every lead. We have every officer invested in this, every investigator, every local agency. The outpouring of support from the law enforcement community has been astounding. We are investing everything we have into this, and we will catch this individual. Having walked through the crime scene, through the hallways of this school, through the classrooms, I can't imagine what the people on scene felt as well. A horrific event where some of them barricaded in classrooms, some of them ran in fear. Can't overstate the tragedy and the horrific event that yesterday was, and how we will work to bring to justice the actions of one individual or any other individuals that assisted in that. Our state has gone through a lot, and we will come out successful. With that, I'll turn the time over to Special Agent Bowles in charge.
Good morning. My name is Robert Bowles, and I am the Special Agent in charge of the Salt Lake Field Office. Following yesterday's tragic shooting of Charlie Kirk, FBI agents have been working around the clock in coordination with our law enforcement partners. We are and will continue to work nonstop until we find the person that has committed this heinous crime and find out why they did it. This morning I can tell you that we have recovered what we believe is the weapon that was used in yesterday's shooting. It is a high-powered bolt-action rifle. That rifle was recovered in a wooded area where the shooter had fled. The FBI laboratory will be analyzing this weapon. Investigators have also collected footwear impression, a palm print, and forearm imprints for analysis. Now, I understand there are a lot of questions about motive. I assure you that all leads, tips are being fully investigated. As of this morning, we have received more than 130 tips. We thank the community for that. The FBI has brought every resource to bear, and we will continue to do so throughout the course of this investigation. The FBI's mission is to protect the American people. It's to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Any attack on the First Amendment is an attack on the very foundation of our democracy. That is why we will relentlessly pursue this case and the shooter until we find him. We also continue to grieve with the family and the community. It's our community. If you have any video or images from the shooting, we ask you to please submit them to our digital media tip website at www.fbi.gov/Utah Valley Shooting. You can also call the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI. We truly rely on the public's help in these types of cases, and no tip is too small or insignificant. Thank you.
Absolutely. So what I'll release about the suspect is suspect blended in well with a college institution. We're not releasing many details right now, and we will soon. But right now we're not. But that individual appears to be of college age. We are confident in our abilities to track that individual. If we're unsuccessful in identifying them immediately, we will reach out for the public's help and the media's help in pushing those photos. That was a new development overnight, working through the night, studying those cameras. So that's something that's new and that we're working through right now. As far as the security, I cannot speak to that. Neither the Department of Public Safety nor the Federal Bureau of Investigation was involved in the planning or security of this event, and that'll have to be a question later for other agencies.
so that's a good question, and it's a question that goes to the safety of the community, right? No, not in those woods. We've walked through those woods and secured it. As to the community, I can tell you that this was a targeted event. We don't believe that the community is at risk. However, we are exhausting every resource to find him, and we will do so.
We learned a lot of new information there, Alisyn. I was
did.
furiously taking notes. I'm sure you were too, as Mark was as well. Significant developments, including being able to track the movements of the shooter as he made his way onto campus, up onto that rooftop, and then escaping, jumping down and into a wooded area in a neighborhood. Also of significance, the impressions that they say they have, footprints and palm print, forearm impression, and the weapon, right? They believe they found the weapon.
Yeah. It sounds like the fact that they're not putting out video of the images that they have of the shooter tells me that they think they're close. They don't want to spook him. They think they're close. They're like, usually police and FBI ask for the public's help when they really need more tips. The fact that they're at the moment only asking for video of the scene if anybody has it, but not putting out the picture of the shooter, it sounds like they don't want to screw anything up right now. But that was very interesting. Also, to learn that I think it was the law enforcement agent there who said that the shooter blended in with the student population or didn't look out of place on a college campus. That also gives us some information.
Yeah, it sounds like you would think that it sounds like a younger person who might look like a college age student. Of course, they didn't elaborate on that, but because they were asked, do you have an ID? They're working to identify this person, obviously, and the video that they have is going to help them do that. We'll continue to monitor developments coming out of Utah and the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to this extended edition of Connecting America here on the USA Today streaming platform. We appreciate you being here on this busy morning. We've just learned a lot from the location of that shooting out there in Utah from law enforcement, Alisyn, who updated us on significant progress in the investigation as they still search for that shooter. But it does sound like they're making some headway.
Oh, they shared a lot of information. Sometimes, as you know, these press conferences are basically just showing face, but this was a lot. They have video of the suspect and they can track his arrival on campus as well as his escape after the shooting. So it sounds like they have a visual ID of what this person looks like.
They've also recovered the weapon believed to be a high-powered bolt-action rifle. They found that in the woods in the area where the shooter escaped into a neighborhood. So we'll continue to keep an eye on any developments as far as that part of the investigation goes. But right now we want to turn to Justine Murray. She's an ambassador with Turning Point USA, the organization that Charlie Kirk co-founded. She also works for Media Research Center in D.C., a media watchdog group that looks out for conservative interests. Justine, we thank you for taking the time out to talk with us here at Connecting America. Our condolences going out to you and all who knew and worked with Charlie Kirk. Tell us about your connection to him, your relationship with him at Turning Point.
First, thank you so much for having me. Dialogue was shot to death yesterday, and the legacy media and our academic institutions helped pull the trigger. I was a Turning Point ambassador, but even before then, I was a college student. And I remember all too well what it was like to be a conservative surrounded by left-wing mobs who would chase you, who would dox you, who would call for your death. And Charlie Kirk actually raised awareness about this. It was actually reported yesterday that he was shot to death as he was talking about left-wing violence, because people my age, Gen Z, we were taught by our college professors and by the media that any view that differs from their own is an existential threat, that speech is violence, but also silence is violence. And at the end of the day, they really meant our existence is a threat to their existence. And they justified violence in the name of protecting themselves, protecting their ideology, instead of actually being able to have a dialogue and an argument, a debate on campus. That's what academic institutions are supposed to be about.
Justine, and we don't know yet, we should say, what the motivation of the shooter was. It certainly feels like a political assassination, but we don't know yet. The suspect, as you know, is still at large. Were you there at the event where Charlie was shot?
No, I was not there, but I've been at many Turning Point USA events as an ambassador and as a student. And I remember my friend Hayden Williams a couple of years ago. He was campaigning for Turning Point USA. He was tabling for them at UC Berkeley, and he was punched in the face. UC Berkeley did nothing about it until they were forced to. But Charlie Kirk raised awareness about that. And it was because of Turning Point, partially because of Turning Point and Charlie Kirk, that President Trump signed a campus free speech executive order during his first term. And all the students, myself included, we were all standing there surrounding the president, but there were so many stories of other students who were mobbed by their campuses, who were beaten up on campus simply because of their views. And if it wasn't for Charlie Kirk raising awareness about that, we probably wouldn't have gotten coverage at all about it. This has been a problem that has gone on for years. The left has tolerated and mainstreamed violence. And you're right, we don't know the motive of the shooter, but the legacy media, before Charlie Kirk's body even cooled, they already started gaslighting him, gaslighting us, claiming that Charlie Kirk was, quote unquote, a divisive and controversial figure. This is what MSNBC and CNN had stated just 5 minutes after he was killed, as if, oh, well, should we really feel too sorry for him? It's almost as if that they too were justifying it. So we can certainly direct their hate-filled rhetoric to recent political assassinations, and we can wonder what really this was.
I mean, if not divisive and conservative, how would you describe Charlie?
Charlie Kirk was a free speech advocate. He represented the very beacon of what this country was about, our First Amendment rights to have a conversation and to debate with each other. That's what made America so special. That's what made this country so different than every other country, even countries who claim to be democracies, especially countries in Europe that claim to have free speech, but then at the end of the day, they arrest people for their speech. And for years, the left has tried to dox us. They wanted us fired from our jobs. They wanted us expelled from school. I remember people wanted my expulsion when I was a college student back at Syracuse. And when that didn't work, they ultimately resorted to violence. At least they're cheering it on. And it's been going on. You can see the pattern for about a year. It started with people celebrating Luigi Mangione because he's been charged with murdering a CEO simply because they don't like that a CEO has too much money. And it goes far beyond politics. The murder of people because of their religious views and because of their race. And the legacy media continues to either seem to justify it or just cover it up and sweep it under the rug.
Yes, but at the same time, Governor Spencer Cox of Utah, a Republican, specifically mentioned in his speech talking about the tragedy of what happened to Charlie Kirk, that there have been assassination attempts in recent months, both of Democratic lawmakers in Michigan, the attempt to burn Democratic Governor Josh Shapiro out of his home in Pennsylvania, and then, of course, the multiple assassination attempts on President Trump. You're talking a lot about pressure of the left on the right, but doesn't it go both ways?
It does, but the legacy media will only cover it one way. Josh Shapiro, the person who tried to murder him was someone who allegedly was a pro-Gaza activist, someone who's preached anti-Semitism that has been mainstreamed and supported by the left. He had the very same views that people marching in our streets, people on the left who cheer on jihad, who cheer on globalizing the intifada by quote unquote, by any means necessary. He held those views. And we have to remember, by the way, today is the anniversary of 9/11. And a lot of the same TikTokers and leftists who are celebrating the murder of Charlie Kirk, they were also the ones who posted videos who were cheering on Osama bin Laden and who teed up his manifesto and said that it was justified by, once again, any means necessary.
We really appreciate you joining us, and I'm hearing a lot of anger in your views right now. How do we channel this anger into something positive, where rather than defaulting to saying it's the left, it's the right, how do we kind of come together, because that's what we're all about here at Connecting America, and channel that anger into something that is positive? And
well, we need to start with proper reporting. Legacy media outlets can't stoke up hatred and fear anymore. It's time to stop justifying or seemingly justifying the murder of someone because they were, quote, right wing, or that they were, quote unquote, a controversial figure. The legacy media, they should be reporting on his death. They should be reporting on the fact that this man was shot, and it was disgusting and it was horrible. But when they start throwing labels at him, it makes me wonder, would they throw labels at anyone else if it was a leftist who, God forbid, was murdered? Would they call him a radical left-wing extremist? I don't think so. So we can start by just simply condemning murder and condemning violence again.
Christine Murray, we really appreciate you being here. We know this is a very difficult time for so many people in our country who believed in Charlie Kirk, and we appreciate hearing your viewpoint on all of this. Everybody is welcome to share with us where they fall on this sort of divisive time in our country. Thank you so much. All right, we're going to move along to how we talk about this, especially with young people, right, Alisyn? How do we make sense of this? How do we try to listen to each other? And we've got Dr. Jeff with us, Dr. Jeff Gardier, to sort of dive into this. People are angry, Jeff. People are emotional. This is a difficult subject for our young people to grapple with. What's your best advice during this difficult time? We're not hearing Dr. Jeff. Perhaps he needs to, hit that unmute button that we always accidentally hit. I mean, we're going to check and make sure. But yeah, we can go back to Jeff. There you are. No, he's in the cone of silence.
I think it's going to take more than an unmute.
Yes, I think so.
Maybe a Hail Mary, right?
A lot to digest there. We're going to take
Yeah.
a pause here, and we'll be right back on Connecting America.
We can't straighten this out, that we put Joe Walsh in.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, why can't we just recap?
Welcome back to Connecting America here at the Sunrise Diner, which is very busy on this Thursday morning in Roselle Park, New Jersey. We've got Alisyn Camerota joining us once again from her global home quarters, as you like to call it, right, Alisyn?
I do, yes. I agree. It's very busy here this morning. I mean, the Charlie Kirk assassination has just sent a ripple through everyone. I mean, through most of the country, I would say. He was just 31 years old. He had a young family. It's hard not to see this as an outpouring of the heated rhetoric that so many people are engaged in right now. And earlier, you guys will remember we talked to former Congressman Joe Walsh, who had been a Tea Party congressman, and he was a mentor of Charlie Kirk's. And so he's, feeling the personal loss today, as well as what this means for the country and what it means for discourse.
Yeah, he met him when he was a teenager. Joe was a father figure to him. Let's listen to what Joe had to say.
Sides of the divide in this country, he was literally like a son to me. I first met him when he was 16 years old. He was from my congressional district. I became a political mentor to him. I helped him start and launch his organization, TPUSA. And I was like a father figure to him. He was a son to me.
and we were very close. And then Trump came along, and we broke up. We would go after each other on social media, being on opposite sides. But Jim, even right up until yesterday, I've just always considered him to be a son. So I'm just so saddened for him and his family.
And I mean, we're sorry for your loss too. I didn't know Charlie Kirk. I'm surprised that our orbits, that I don't even believe I've ever interviewed him, despite him being such a well-known figure in the country. But I was gutted. I was gutted by this. This isn't who we are. I mean, he, in fact, was someone who always, correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, invited debate and discourse. I mean, he was sitting under a banner that said, "Prove me wrong." He believed we should talk to people on other sides of the aisle. And so he sort of represented, I mean, though he was a stalwart right-wing, conservative figure, I think he believed in engaging the other side.
Well, two things, Alisyn. You all know, this is the world we live in now. Any public figure, when I go out and give any speech in public, I'm worried about who's in that room, who's at that event. This is the world we live in now. It is like it's political warfare out there every time we're in public. Charlie engaged in that warfare. He did take on all comers and welcome debate. He was very provocative. He was very in your face, very strong with his beliefs. And just look at the reaction. I mean, I abhorred much of what he believed. And it's possible to abhor what he believed and condemn murder. And there are so many people on the left and the right last night and today who just can't make that distinction. We have
Joe Walsh there, a man who really toned down his rhetoric from his early days in politics. The congressman from Illinois, they were both from the same state. Charlie Kirk from the Chicago suburbs in Illinois. All right, we want to hear from our frequent political contributor, Jim McQueenie, who's got some thoughts on this dark time that we're in. Jim, what's on your mind?
I do. Well, I do. And I think the New York Post, which is a kind of a conservative newspaper here in New York, basically absolutely had it right today on here, where they said on the front page, what we have to do is get back to being able to have a reasonable disagreement, so reasonable disagreement when violence is not an option on here. So, but I think frankly, we are inured to a lot of this violence. And Alisyn said before that we are not these people, but to a degree, you have to disagree with that. I have dual citizenship, Irish and US. And by way of comparison, the United States, we had 18,000 gun deaths last year. And in Ireland, they had 3. Our neighbors, Canada, they had a couple of hundred. China, which has 3 times the population of the United States, had less than Canada on here. So when I talk to my cousins, they don't want to come here anymore. And that's the truth. They come for St. Patrick's Day every once in a while to get out of here real quick. But one of the answers they gave me was that you shoot your presidents. And I was shocked when they said that, but I realized that since President Ford, he was shot at twice and missed. We've had shot and wounded with Trump and Reagan on here. And, it's scary to look at this proclivity for violence. And to some extent, I think we are inured to this or hardened to it. For instance, last January, right, that terrible, terrible midair crash in Washington. 60 some odd people were killed on that. It was a tragedy. Yes, it was, right? But gun deaths are twice that. Gun deaths are twice that, basically, in the United States every year. By the way, auto deaths every day, both gun deaths and auto deaths are about 100 a day. But the media doesn't carry that unless it's a celebrity or a tragedy type of thing. They don't focus enough on the everyday violence here. So that helps us really get hardened to all this.
Yeah, Jim, I take your point. I mean, I think when I said this is not who we are, it was wishful thinking. I agree. I also there's no doubt we are a country of gun violence. That is just demonstrably true. There is no doubt about that. And we have so much gun violence compared to other democracies, compared to other advanced countries, for sure. I guess what I meant was I want us to be a country where we can agreeably disagree, but we are not that. We're not there either, to be
Yeah,
honest. I mean, our political rhetoric is so much more heated than in the past.
yeah, absolutely. And frankly, we reluctant to admit it, but we are a violence-prone society. In a way, with this gun stuff, we've lost our way. In the clouds of gun smoke, it's monumental. And as I said, my Irish cousins will not come here anymore because they fear it will be them when they come here. That's hardly kind of being in lockstep with the Second Amendment protection for a well-regulated militia. What we have here. What we have here is honestly gun chaos.
Jim, when Charlie Kirk was still alive, he said something to the effect of gun deaths are the price of freedom in America. With that quote resonating in our minds now based on what's happened, what do you think is going to happen going forward in terms of our views of the Second Amendment in light of this tragedy and the repeated tragedies that we've seen with gun violence and now political assassinations?
Well, let me go back to your comment that this is the price of gun ownership, in a sense, is the price of freedom here. Well, as I said before, on auto deaths, we accept 100 and some odd deaths a day, mothers, fathers, children, on the roads of America as the price of mobility. What does that really say about us as people, by the way, if we accept that, or the media doesn't continue covering it unless it's the death of a celebrity like Charlie, involving somebody like uh, uh, a celebrity, if you will, here, and then it gets coverage and then it disappears. But on the Second Amendment thing, it's going to be revisited. It's going to be tough. It's a Supreme Court judgment call, and they've kind of said ownership on the decision some time ago um, is a right, and it's an individual's right. But the original Constitution suggested that a well-regulated militia is a collective right under some organized principle, not individual ownership. And I think that's what's going to come back to the Supreme Court again for clarification.
Are you optimistic at all, Jim, that we can get back to the days where we can talk to one another civilly when we disagree, when we're on different sides of the aisle? Because it certainly doesn't feel like it right now.
Well, Jim, I'm not optimistic about anything involving guns in America since Sandy Hook. When 20 innocents aged between 6 and 8 are slaughtered by a gunman in a mass shooting, if we haven't done anything of any real substance since then, there's been some efforts, window dressing, right? You know that they're not really it's not going to come from politicians in this regard.
And Jim, what about just in terms of the political rhetoric? We just had on a student, well, no, I'm sorry, a colleague of Charlie Kirk's, Justine Murray, who was understandably seemed very angry. She was very dug in terms of blaming the left for this, though we don't have any information about the shooter yet. But basically, she felt she shared that she felt on her college campus she felt very marginalized as a conservative. She felt under attack as a conservative. How do you begin to bridge conversation with people who are so dug in?
Well, you say to people like Justine, you're rather harsh on your criticism of the left when you remember Timothy McVeigh blew up a building in Oklahoma City not long ago, killing so many people, a federal building. He was from the right. We have crackpots on each side, and still we don't know about this incident involving Charlie. But it's the kind of case where I think the Post had it right of all newspapers. The Post said we need to be able to get to a point where we can have a reasonable disagreement among each other, where violence is not an option.
Do you think this is going to be a moment for that type of introspection on the left and the right, or are things just going to get worse from here on in?
I don't have a lot of hope for it getting better, to be very frank. As I said before, to me, personally, it struck me so severe about those innocents who were killed at Sandy Hook at the school. And the school incidents, even mass shootings that have occurred since then, they seem to be unabated. The total death toll, people like to say, is getting a little letter here and there, but it's horrible. I go back to my Irish cousins and they look at America and they say, you shoot your presidents in addition to the 18,000 people who get shot and killed in America every day. 3 people got shot and killed in Ireland. And those other statistics I showed, China has 3 times our population. It was only a couple hundred people shot by gun. So where are we going?
All right, Jim McQueenie, thank you for being here on Connecting America. We want to turn now to Jeff Gardier. Dr. Gardier is with us to talk about how we broach the subject with young people, our kids. We do not have him, Alisyn.
Stop promising me Jeff Gardier, Jim.
I'm so sorry, but I do want to take us
promising.
to Shanksville, Pennsylvania, Alisyn, where there's a ceremony underway where United Flight 93, as we know, crashed into that field after passengers sort of took action on their own, and that flight diverted.
Project, the Friends organization.
And that ceremony, as we said, underway there in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, when the passengers and crew members sort of stormed the cockpit and famously said, "Let's roll," and diverted that plane from what may have been the U.S. Capitol.
Helping to honor the 40 passengers and crew members this morning is retired Forester Scott Egerud. For many years, Scott provided essential technical assistance in our reforestation efforts. He and the staff at the Department of the Interior's Office of Surface Mining Reclamation Enforcement, or OSMRE for short, supported the decade-long effort to reforest this former coal surface mine with native tree species. Scott will lead the reading of their names, joined by family members who have made their journey here from across our great nation and around the world to read the name of their loved one. Joining Scott and family members are Chet Edwards and Michael French. For 12 years, Chet, a now retired
All right, that ceremony underway in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. It's a beautiful memorial that's there as well. I don't know if any of you have ever been, but it's a very peaceful kind of feeling that comes over you there at that memorial, where all those lives were lost. Yeah, and the heroes on that plane. So much to think about on this 9/11 anniversary. So much to digest.
It was. I mean, yes, there's so much happening, and it's really, it was a more emotional morning than I expected. It's when you start remembering what happened 24 years ago and then the arc of where we are now, it's very emotional. And again, I just have to say we can do better, and we must.
And we know we should say, Alisyn, emotional for you because we all wanted to think back to where we were on 9/11. You were on your honeymoon, and I know that's a difficult memory.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. That's Connecting America on this special day. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.